Hi everybody, welcome to the Cision webinar, Crush Crises Before They Spread. I'm Natalia Dickey, Director of Product Management at Cision, and your moderator for today. During today's webinar with Peter LaMotte, we're going to learn how to build brand in peacetime, to survive the crises that happen in a social world where customers and not brands control the message. You'll learn how to develop a crisis communication plan before trouble breaks, how to choose the best platforms for delivering impactful responses, how to improve overall content strategies before, during, and after the crisis, and how to squash issues fast using the right internal and external resources. Before I introduce Peter, I do have a few quick housekeeping points. So first, questions. We will have a moderated Q&A at the end of today's webinar, so feel free to use the chat box on your webinar panel anytime throughout the webinar today to submit those questions. Also, if you want a copy of our slides, they'll be posted to cision.com and SlideShare after today's webinar. If you're on Twitter today and you want to tweet about this webinar, please use the Cision webinar hashtag, that's one word. And the top Cision webinar tweets are also going to receive a Cision prize pack in the mail. So we'll be revealing the winners on Twitter shortly after the webinar. With that, let me introduce our speaker. Peter LaMotte leads the award-winning digital team at Levick. A proven digital marketing and strategy leader, Peter is well known for his ability to help clients drive adoption, change, and understanding through really unique combinations of digital strategies and channels. His client experience includes success with dozens of diverse brands, including the AARP, NEA, Sony, Kraft, Colgate-Palmolive, Yahoo, and Audio-Technica. Peter, welcome. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Talia. First of all, thank you, Cision, for asking me to share some of these concepts. To everyone on the line, I appreciate your time. We've got a little less than an hour. We'll go through this fairly quickly. What I've done today is I've taken two presentations and merged them together. Start pretty high level, and then we'll bring it down to tangible sort of rules in any crisis response and building a crisis team. So it should be a lot of fun. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. At the end of this, you'll see my email address. If you have any specific questions, I often find that when we're dealing with crises, people don't necessarily want to volunteer what they're dealing with. Happy to talk to you post-call if you have any specific questions. But as you mentioned, my name is Peter LaMotte. I run the digital team over here at Levick, do a lot of crisis work. Levick has been around for 15 years and is really one of the foremost crisis firms based here in Washington, D.C., where Cision is as well, and have handled corporate crises to political crises to individuals, nation states, across the board. So my colleagues, and some of them, their specialty is pure crisis. My background comes from marketing and advertising, so that's where a lot of this is based off of. How do you think like a marketer? Many of you I know on the call are coming from the communication side of the house, and we have a real need now to think like a marketer, and that's what you're going to see for at least the first half of this presentation, is just when you do think like a marketer, how much that can actually benefit you in building an army of supporters and advocates that can really save the day when it comes to dealing with a crisis and protecting your brand leading up to it. So that's who I am, that's who Levick is, and once again, if you have any individual questions, feel free, please, throughout this to ask them. We'll answer them here at the end of the call. And then if you have anything that's a little more confidential, you can always reach out to me directly. So why don't we get started? Like I said, we'll start out pretty high level. Let's talk about the way it used to be. Anyone who's been in this industry for more than 15 years or more knows that the world we used to live in was much cleaner. It was much more controlling. We controlled that message. We could take a day to respond to the media. We could put together a response strategy. Now we're dealing with instant and viral communications, and those simply were not part of our reality when back in the day. And what we have to deal with is this concept that we are simply no longer in control. The world is now very different. We don't have the luxury of time. We can be overwhelmed as an organization in the blink of an eye. We simply will never be able to respond to all inquiries. There are just so many outlets now. There's so many people looking for a response. And we now live in a time where the voice of one person online can carry the same weight as a seasoned journalist, or even worse. That one person can actually discredit our official messaging coming from our organization. You can have people online that can put that into complete question. So the only way we can deal with this is to have a plan, and have a damn good one at that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because historically what we're talking about, and many boards and executives are looking at the world this way, they're thinking about corporate growth plans. They're not often thinking about what could go wrong. Interestingly enough, though, the majority of them do believe that something will go wrong. But many of times, they're just simply too afraid to think about it, or to address it, or to even deal with it. And we've seen this historically when it comes to social media, and how do they react, and how do they deal with the concept of online engagement. So while they're thinking about these corporate growth plans, they're not thinking about the crisis plans. Time and time again, the companies that handle crises well are the ones that planned ahead of time. They're the ones that put together a well thought out plan. These are plans with strong messaging. They have pre-crisis processes, and they're tapping into the right people and using the right tools. Not just it. People aren't building plans. You have a plan, you have to use it. You have to add to it. You have to practice it. And most importantly, you have to know what that plan is. And that means it's a living, breathing document. It's something that we are constantly adapting to. It's something that is not dusty and sitting on a shelf somewhere, and granted that's dated, maybe it's not in a hard drive somewhere, because think about it. When you put together a crisis plan, as I'm sure many of you on the call have, it names names and names offices and names groups that are constantly changing. People are constantly leaving organizations, and they're leaving with their expertise, and they're leaving with the training to respond to these crises, and they're leaving with their knowledge of where the threats are coming from. And so what's interestingly the case, we know what the sources of crises are, whether they be internal or external. They're fairly well known. Now, let's put that into perspective. Maybe you're not going to predict that a fire is going to break out in a warehouse from a lightning strike caused by a tornado in a state that doesn't normally get tornadoes, but you know that there's a risk to your organization maybe from natural disasters, and that will affect you at some point. So you can take a look at this this list of risks. We know roughly where a crisis is going to come from. On the internal side, you have lawsuits. Maybe you're a public company and your stock performance is so low that it becomes part of public discussion. You could have whistleblowers. Recalls are something that we deal a lot with, and the repercussions of that from regulatory standpoints. You could have labor disputes or employee issues. It could be all over the place for internal issues. But we also have external issues. We have the natural disasters. You can't predict those. You can't say when those are going to happen, but you can prepare for them. You can have criminal activities, hostile takeovers, customer complaints. There's all kinds of areas where a crisis can come from. And this, more and more today, is taking place online. And both internal and external. I'll show you a few examples. Now, what you see here are two distinct examples of something that's becoming more and more common. And that is hacking or people basically attacking our brand. Now, this is a perfect example of two brands that would have never expected this to happen. And I'm sure they were already really well prepared for all kinds of incidences, but these two, probably not. So at the top you have Burger King. Now Burger King's Twitter account was hacked. Someone said, jokingly of course, that they had been acquired by McDonald's, and this went up on Burger King's account. Now Burger King fixed this and rectified this and actually did a great job of sort of laughing it off. But if you're on your way to Burger King to get a Whopper and you see this has happened, and even if you believe it, you're probably not going to change your decision to go get a Whopper. But down below is a much more serious example, and something that we're all starting to deal with, which is the AP was hacked. And the AP was hacked when someone said breaking 2 explosions in the White House and Barack Obama is injured. You saw when this took place an immediate drop in the U.S. stock market because people believed it. Because what does AP sell? They sell news and they sell reliability. Now AP did a very good job of shutting down all social media. They made sure that the intruder to their network was prevented from getting back in. They dealt with that issue on its own through their own crisis plan. But the point is that the threats from what were once kind of a joke, didn't have much of an impact, can have a tremendous impact. And this is a perfect example of where when people say, oh, you know, it's just social media, what's the big deal? Well, this social media attack put a big ding in the U.S. economy for a brief moment. So it just goes to show you that what you may think is an external threat may be coming from somewhere completely new and unexpected. But it's not just external, it's internal as well. And not for nefarious reasons. Now, if you are my age or older, on the top left, that image immediately, you know what it is. And that's the Challenger explosion. However, at American Apparel, one of their younger social media team members didn't naturally see what many of us did, which is the Challenger explosion. They thought it was some very strange looking clouds and posted it to their Instagram account with nothing more than smoke and clouds and hashtags. Had no idea. There was nothing nefarious about it. It was a simple mistake, but it went viral very quickly. At the top right, Uber, you had an executive make some comments at a dinner, not expecting them to go out of the dinner party at all, but they went out very quickly and across all news media outlets. And the CEO had to respond. He chose Twitter, but had to get online and apologize for what one of his executives thought he was saying in private conversation. Down at the bottom, you have an example where a third party was managing social media for Chrysler, and they simply thought they were tweeting on their own account and didn't realize they had logged into the official Chrysler account and said something that Chrysler would have never said in a million years. And in all of these cases, they came out and their PR team had a difficult few days or a difficult week, but they rectified it. But the point is and you see in the bottom right, it can come from manufacturing. Simply a designer who didn't realize that their product had historical connotations and brought a tremendous amount of pain and essentially a digital and social media crisis for the firm. So this just goes to show that all of the hard work we put into protecting our companies, building our brands, is always a threat. So a lot of people think of BP as a major crisis, and it was. As brands spend millions of dollars on marketing, and brands are always going to be susceptible. And BP is a perfect example of that. They have actually done, post-environmental crisis, a great job with their marketing and PR and bringing it together since the days of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. But if you go back to those dark days for BP, it wasn't just the environmental accident that they were having to deal with. They had an issue where their brand was being hijacked in the midst of one of their most difficult corporate crises. And this is an example of it down on the bottom right. Somebody created a Twitter account called BP Global PR and started saying all kinds of terrible things. Now, there's no way that BP, which had its own channels of conversation, would have been able to prepare for this. And really what you learn is what you're living is that the threats are everywhere, even when you try your best, even when all the organization as a whole is firing on all cylinders, because there are others out there that will try and hurt your brand. And the power of the internet has made it so that any clever idea, no matter how destructive or untrue, can actually gain traction and cause you all sorts of heartache. You look at the top left, a mock of the United website. It is called Untitled. Now, if you look in the smaller box there, and whether you can read it or not, but it's talking about discrimination. It is essentially a website that is out to attack United Airlines. And it says, and it's done in a way that is clearly mocking or based off of United Airlines' current website. So there's brand confusion, and what this has caused across boardrooms across America is people to all of a sudden wonder, well, why the heck are we even spending all this time, money, and effort? Because when you, the marketers and the PR people, say, you know, we need to do this, all we seem to do is deal with all this grief, and you're constantly having to defend. And so you deal with these kinds of situations. Now, I have this hanging up in my office. As I mentioned the onset of the call, I'm the head of the digital practice here. But this really was 3, 4, 5 years ago the goal of a lot of corporate executives and board members is, come on, at some point this Facebook thing is going to go away, or Twitter is going to go away. Do we really need to spend any effort? Can't we just put a 19-year-old intern on this to handle our brand online? And I think a lot of people not only are realizing that that's a terrible idea, because of some of the examples we just showed, but we can actually turn the tables. And yes, audiences are a lot more vocal now, but we only tend to look at the downside. Ask yourself for a moment, you know, how do you tap into these vocal audiences to actually benefit the company? And most importantly, how do you tap into them when you really need them? When you need this passion and this excitement to really start defending, to start building that barrier. Because what's happened is, my favorite slide, speaker, we far too often run to the shadows when things go badly, which, to be honest, is not a terrible idea, at least for the short time. I'll tell you that every crisis manager at some point will say one of the best things to do at the beginning of a crisis is to keep quiet. Because what if you actually never had to say a thing? What if you actually had the army that was already there speaking on your behalf? What if they were already there defending you before the crisis even emerged? And a lot of these online digital crises, a lot of these crises that take place on social media are often diluted or prevented when brands that have tremendous loyalty and engagement have already reached out to and have built the relationships with the people that are there to help them. So we don't need to panic. We simply need to think. Now, I'm a former IBMer, and I can tell you this is probably one of my favorite taglines of all time, but it is truly the key. We need to be thinking clearly during peacetime so that you can execute and not panic during the crisis. think early on how you can actually engage brand ambassadors now before you're in the position to have to beg or, I don't know, even worse, pay for them to engage with your brand. But the key is, or one of the many keys, is let's not get carried away by the rhetoric. We can sit here at very high levels and say, here's what we're going to do. Let's put together a crisis team. I'm going to go out and I'm going to read Seth Godin's, most popular marketing book. I get it, Peter. It's all about engagement. And I'm going to put together a crisis plan. I'm going to figure out how to engage people. But the fact is, you can't do it alone. You need to assess what your strengths are, understand what your weaknesses are, and comprehend what your adversaries are actually capable or willing to do. And I would say most importantly, and you're going to hear this a lot, is we need to start thinking like marketers. Let's start with the most obvious part of what we're talking about. Communications is now marketing. Marketing is a big part market research, and branding is now communications. Our worlds, as someone who came from marketing and is now in the communication space, they're all blending together. If you're a PR person, you need to align yourself with the experts on your marketing team. And if you're one of the digital marketing experts, you need to understand the nuances of PR. Because today, we're really talking about, and when I say today, I mean this webinar, we're talking about crisis preparedness. We're looking for ways to build that army that are going to speak on our behalf. We're looking for ways to predict where the coming wave is coming from and how do we defend. And the keys to that concept are rooted in how marketers build brand ambassadors. Now, they're not doing it to prevent a crisis. They're looking to prevent a downturn in sales. But nothing will bring about a downturn in sales faster than a real crisis. So everyone should be on the same page here. Now, I'm a Delta fan. I pretty much only fly Delta. And the reason being, or at least the reason it started, I like their routes, and their prices were okay. But what took me to the next level as a brand ambassador and as a brand advocate was marketing. Not PR, it wasn't fleet management, it wasn't that they were handing out better peanuts. It was how they appealed to me off the tarmac. It's their website. It was their mobile interface, it was their rewards program, and it was their digital marketing. They tie the simple rules of messaging into everything they do. They tell simple, engaging, often surprising stories, and they tell it everywhere. On YouTube, through their email marketing, on their website. So the point here is they already had my attention, but over time they won my loyalty. They won the ability for me, whenever I hear someone say, oh, I had such a terrible experience on Delta, for me to not just say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but provide either anecdotal evidence of why I absolutely love them, give them recommendations on how they could prevent that from happening again. I am exactly what every brand manager and PR manager is looking for when the crisis hits. So how do we do it? Well, we do it through one-on-one relationships. And that's building true and authentic relationships. Now, I realize the true and authentic, these are terms that are thrown around in marketing circles all the time. But these are all the things that your marketing colleagues have been struggling to do for years. And they're getting their direction from the head of sales to drive revenue, and that's all well and good. But if you can support the same effort, if you can tap into this group of individuals that are going to defend your brand in the time of a crisis, and they're going to carry the flag during peacetime, well, that's what's important. That's what we're talking about as communication specialists learning from marketing. And we've been going through some nice and pretty slides here, but it's really a question of how do we actually do that? Well, the answer is probably one that you don't want to hear, which is you tell me. Because The answer is everything, and it's probably a whole lot less than what you think it is. And it means turning to tools that have proven engagement. One of the most powerful tools that we have is not social media, it's email marketing. Email marketing wasn't very sexy 5 years ago, so everyone got excited, or maybe you can go further back, but it wasn't as exciting as building out Facebook pages. Well, Facebook pages aren't as exciting, and people are starting to appreciate the engagement and the customization that you can build into email marketing. Same with websites. All of the tools that we've had around us, it's not going to be the next Snapchat that builds these armies. It's going to be the tools that you already have, the tools that you've been using as communication specialists, but putting the effort to make sure that the messaging is simple, it's authentic, and it's storytelling. It's what people are going to do to buy into your company. Now, a lot of you might be saying, yeah, but Peter, I sell, I don't know, plumbing parts, or we're not as sexy as Delta. Well, the fact of the matter is there are people that find you sexy. There are people that are your stakeholders and the ones that matter. Maybe you don't need to appeal to 5 million people like Delta does. Maybe you only need to appeal to 5,000 people. But it's going to come down to the 5 people, or maybe the 50 people, that at the time of a crisis you are going to want to turn to and know are there with you defending your brand online, in person, and through every possible means necessary. But it's really up to you. This is the key. You have to choose your own adventure. Honestly, I used to love these books as a kid. I wanted to figure out how to get them into the presentation. But it is your ability to choose what works for you. And the reason why I'm hedging is just this. It changes. It changes all the time. You cannot keep thinking that one strategy is going to work for you. Now, these are all social media, and I do that just because there's a new shiny object every 5 minutes on social media. But what's going to work for you to build the brand advocates at a retail consumer goods company is not going to work as well for a petrochemical company. But that doesn't mean that they're not out there. So that's a very high-level conversation. And I'm going to break this into sort of 3 parts, and now we're getting into sort of the medium level. What do we do to prepare for the digital crisis? And then the last part we'll talk about what do we do to prepare for any crisis, any corporate crisis. Well, let's talk about some just very tangible steps. And these are the 8 steps that I sort of place on all digital crises approaches. And we'll go through each of these. How do we identify those influencers? How do we identify stakeholders? Monitoring, figuring out what are the actual risks, create the messaging, being prepared on those platforms, building guidelines, preventing people from going, off the rails when they're talking online, and that really is going to speak to the internal risks we have, and then integrating into an overall corporate crisis plan. And then, of course, testing. And we'll talk about what that corporate crisis plan is. Excuse me. So let's talk about identifying influencers. Who are these people? Well, I keep saying they really could be anyone. These are the people that most likely have already reached out to you. These are people that you already know about. Maybe you should be reaching out to your customer service executives. Maybe you're reaching out to your sales executives. But the information is there in your organization to figure out who they are. Because these could be people that you solved the problems for. They came to you with a problem and you fixed it. These could be people who are already online talking about your product or service or organization, and you simply need to provide them with the incentive to jump on board. These could be your bloggers, your journalists, your heavy social media users. They're already out there. You just need to find them. The example that Malcolm Gladwell used to use ages ago with the tipping point was Dove soap. Dove soap has a 1-800 number on the back. Well, Dove Soap has a 1-800 number on the back. That means that people are calling Dove Soap to talk about soap. And the reason I use that example is there's probably no simpler product out there than soap. It doesn't need directions. It's soap, yet people call Dove to talk about soap. And many of these calls are people that love Dove Soap. So you provide them with means of speaking on your behalf. Provide them with the messaging that they are going to speak on, and then provide them with a communications channel that allows them to come back to you when you need them most. Because when you are in a crisis, if these people love you and your brand, they're going to come to you for answers. They're not going to listen to just anyone out there that is destroying or saying negative things about your brand. So provide those opportunities. And one of the examples I've used over the years, it's an old one, but I always felt it was a great example of where people wouldn't expect there to be brand advocates, was Quicken Software. Quicken Software, before social media had ever blown up, excuse me, Quicken Software would send boxes to its biggest brand advocates, the people that would call them and say, I just love your product. And in these boxes were T-shirts, mugs, a little piece of paper that told them the messaging of why Quicken Software was so effective, gave them some stats that they could essentially incorporate into their conversations. And when you think, great, they gave them a mug and a T-shirt, but yeah, if that person is sitting at their office and they have a mug on their desk that just says Quicken Software, at some point someone's going to ask, what is up with the mug? Why do you have a mug for your tax software and accounting software? So the point is there are all kinds of very old school ways to build these influencers. And if you just know who they are to begin with and start listening to other people in your organization as to who those influencers are, then you match that with basic marketing research. You match it with the ability to say, okay, these bloggers, who are they speaking to? How influential are they? These journalists, the people that have called me, that I know about them, how much are they talking to their friends? It just takes the effort of figuring out and thinking what's the impact that they could have on the larger conversation. So that's step one. Step two is about stakeholders. Well, who are the stakeholders? These are the people that are most affected by, you, and you are most affecting. So this could be regulatory bodies, this could be your board of directors, this could be shareholders, this could be unions, this could be customer advocates. What you have done by identifying the influencers and the stakeholders, you basically narrowed down the majority of all the noise in the universe to the signals that you need to be listening to. And what does that mean? Well, that means that monitoring is a big part of that. Now, I need to say, this webinar is hosted by Cision, and Cision has some great tools, and you should look at Cision tools. But there are a lot of monitoring tools because a lot of them are expensive. There are some out there that are really expensive, and there are some out there that are free, and often you're getting what you pay for. And if you're a small mom and pop company, maybe you can't afford Radian 6 or some massive application. But if you have some budget, well, then maybe you should talk to Cision and see what they can offer you. But the key here is these conversations are taking place online and in the media, and you need to be aware of that. And when you overlay the influencers and the stakeholders on top of this monitoring, all of a sudden you understand what's going on and what conversations are taking place. Excuse me. So, what does that actually mean? Why is this important as it relates to a crisis? You can see the crisis coming if you look for it. You can see discontent in your customer base. You can see repetition. You can see signals. You can start seeing trends. Don't wait for the wave to hit the shore. Look for the fluctuation in the ocean. And that's what monitoring tools do. We didn't have the tools that we now have even 2 years ago. The tools that are available for you to hear a crisis coming, especially one online, is so much better than it's ever been. And when we talk about living in the crisis, this is going to be the key to measuring the positive and, well, hopefully positive, but negative trends when the crisis starts and as you manage the crisis. Who's talking about it? What are they saying? These tools all come with sentiment analysis. It all allows you to see what are the people that we have identified are controlling the conversation, what are they saying? Great time for me to develop a cough. I apologize. And so how do we respond to this? And we're moving through the list of 8 things here. Assume you have identified the influencers and stakeholders, and you're monitoring. You're listening to the noise to find the signal. You know the people that you should be listening to and what they are saying. Well, this is where you need to now create your platforms. This is where, when the crisis hits, and these are random examples, these are not clients of mine, but that these outlets, these organizations, and these are consumer products here, but they have set up the platforms to deal with these crises, because what we already know from the presentation, and all of you, I'm guessing, are seasoned communications experts, you know where these risks are going to be. And the term dark site, if you don't know the term dark site, and I'm sure 90% of you do, which is these are websites and landing pages that are set up to address issues that have not yet happened but we know are going to happen. Sometimes these are set up one day before something goes public. Sometimes they're set up long before there's ever an issue. But I can guarantee you that every major retail outlet out there has a data breach platform ready to go. Now, top right, you see Target, you see Ortega on the left there, and that's also on the right part of the website. These are all means of communication platforms that were set up ahead of time to notify their customers that are affected by some crisis. So part of your digital crisis is to understand how do you respond when you're in it. And in this particular case, it's about dark sites and it's about email marketing on this slide. But make sure that this is already part of your plan. How are we going to reach out to people? How are we going to communicate? Yes, you want to turn on Twitter. Yes, you want to reach out through Facebook. Yes, you want to create a video. But make sure all of that is set up. You don't want to be doing that in a panic. Moving ahead. Create your social guidelines. Know who is going to be talking on behalf of your organization, what they are allowed to say. Make sure messaging points are prefabricated before anyone starts talking. How often? So when are they actually going to speak? Why would they ever speak? Remember, we talked about a lot of times we just stay quiet until we see what's actually happening in this situation. Is it going to go away quickly or not? And then where are they going to communicate? Often organizations will run out and try and communicate from every possible platform they have available. And that's rarely the case. Figure out where the conversations are happening and address them there. And if people are asking on another platform, route them over to it. A landing page often can be very effective in being the aggregator of all information. So that means you use social media to say, please go to mycompany.com/recall or mycompany.com/incident or whatever it may be related to it. Use the tools that you have and make sure that when it comes to social guidelines in both peacetime and in crisis that you have who, what, when, why, and where figured out long before, because you're going to have far too much going on in the midst of a crisis. Now, here's the other thing. We talk about this almost in a silo. Talk about it as this digital and crisis piece, and yet we often just forget about the traditional corporate crisis plan. Digital is not the end-all, be-all. It is one thing that you need to be worried about, and it needs to be integrated. Because as much as we've been talking about integrating with marketing on this call, we need to talk about this as a larger crisis issue. We need to make sure that the digital response is part of a larger crisis plan. We're going to talk about that larger crisis plan here shortly, but as far as a digital crisis goes, it's far too often looked at as a standalone process, and it can't be. And then this final piece, number 8, this is something you're going to see in both the crisis plan and the digital crisis plan, is test, execute, and train. If you are prepared, if you have tested, if you have run simulations, and you are training people to respond, you will not have a problem, because now we're making the assumption that you have worked with marketing to build this army, you have worked on all of your plans for a digital response, everyone is ready to go, and when that wave hits the shore, there's no one there for it to affect, or if so, it's going to be minimal. From a social media messaging standpoint, be prepared. I can't say that enough. Know that strategy, be genuine, apologize. There will be mistakes that are made, and correct them. Unless there are legal ramifications as to why you can't, you should be willing to say, you know what, we made a mistake when we said that something was going live, or we were sending out the fix on Saturday and it didn't go out till Sunday. We should have said Sunday. But make sure that they know you're working at that. And make sure you understand what's actually going out, what people are seeing. Noticed recently there were some political announcements around crises. I won't get into it, but the point is that the images that were coming out from the press team of this political candidate were terrible. Use social media to actually show the best of your organization in the time of a crisis. Not that you are cowering, not that you are struggling. Show that you are sincere human beings that are committed to fixing this problem. And I'll give you 2 examples. One that it's sort of the standard torchbearer of crisis management response on social media, and the other one that's a little bit more recent. But if you remember a while back, JetBlue was by no means the first to deal with this, but they had passengers that were stranded for 8 hours because of a snowstorm, and people went nuts. And it was the early days of social media. And what JetBlue did here was they fought fire with fire, and they did an amazing job, because that night the CEO got on YouTube, showed an honest and humble face to say, "We are sorry." And they took that message and they shared it on Facebook, they sent out emails, and they had that dark landing page, ready to go. And JetBlue is doing just fine after all of that. But the point is, they took to social media to fight a firestorm that was breaking out on social media. More recently, SeaWorld. SeaWorld for the past few years has been getting attacked for many reasons, but most recently blackfish. What you may or may not know is that SeaWorld actually has started to turn around, and their numbers are coming back. And one of the ways they've done that is they have totally revamped how they communicate with people online. If you go to SeaWorld.com, you don't see them pushing tickets. You see their commitment to what we would call corporate social responsibility. And that's what's important, is communicating in the way that people want to see you communicate, because the people that are supporting Blackfish and believe that that is the right story aren't necessarily buying tickets. But the people that are on the fence and that are going to SeaWorld, if they just saw buy tickets, have fun, it would be as if they were paying no attention. And instead what they've done through social media, they've created the SeaWorld Cares campaign. They speak directly to how they take care of the animals. This is aside from what you think personally about SeaWorld and what they do. It's how they're communicating and they're addressing the problem head on. So we're sort of running out of time here, so I want to move to that last and final piece. And normally I just stop the presentation at that point because we walk the digital crisis and from beginning to end how it happens online. We've talked about, once again, engage with marketing, but don't think of digital as just this shiny object. It's part of a crisis management plan. But what our firm is known for, and I think what we do better than anyone, is how a true crisis is handled. So I wanted to give you 4 sort of rules of the road for handling crisis management and putting together preparation before the crisis hits. Now, rule number 1, before you can build a crisis team, you first need to conduct a risk assessment. Let's start with the team. We all too often throw together a team without knowing exactly what we're preparing for. A team needs to be well thought out, but it also needs to reflect the reality of what they're actually going to prepare for. So you need to assess the risks to your organization regularly. And those assessments need to be conducted across the whole organization. That's why it's important not to think of digital as just one. It's one of many. Because remember, not everything is a crisis. It's a perfect sort of very simple graph, and it's fundamental of what you should actually be worrying about. What's the impact of your organization and what's the likelihood of it happening? If you look across the top from right to left, you have what's negligible. And over on the far left, from top to bottom, if you look at the bottom right there, if it's negligible and it's improbable, don't worry about it. Have a minimal part of your plan dedicated to that. But naturally, as you move up and to the left, if you have a problem that is frequent and catastrophic, chances are you're not even on this call. You're dealing with it right now. But if you have a remote possibility of something catastrophic happening to your organization, that better be in the crisis plan, and you should adapt to that. So look at it this way, to oversimplify this slide. If it's in anything but green, make sure you have incorporated it into your crisis plan and figure out the risks to your organization where they sit on this chart. Rule number 2, communication should never own the crisis management team. What do you mean by that? Well, this is the best slide to show that. What exactly is the PR team going to do in the midst of this crisis? They're part of it, but there is a much bigger part of the organization that is being affected by this. So this is a rule that comes to me from my colleagues that handle these kinds of crises, and it's who exactly should be operating on this. And that's why across the organization, an integrated crisis team needs to be built, and that includes legal, HR, operations, marketing, logistics, EH&S, security, and communications. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody should be part of this, but what you need to be doing is building plans that incorporate an integrated crisis team as to who will be affected. Now, what you see here is with the environmental health and safety, security and legal, they're often part of the team, but communication needs to be part of that. But maybe in this particular case, depending on what the risk is, marketing doesn't need to be in it. It might be an HR risk alone, and HR should be on that team. So build it from there, and make sure that when you have an executive that oversees a crisis team, that they are setting the strategy, and the team reports the results. And it's back and forth. When you're in the midst of a crisis, you want to have constant communication, going back. How is it affecting the strategy? What are the results of that strategy? And adapt accordingly. But here's the catch with rule number 3. Don't wait for that crisis to convene, the crisis team. Don't wait for the crisis to show up before you have that team ready. Because there's a simple way to handle a crisis, and that's to follow the plan and have the team already laid out. So the rules for that team are the following. Have the plan and review it. Make sure that you are constantly updating the plan. When we talked at the onset of the call, we talked about not adapting. When people leave the organization, they're leaving with skill sets. How are you compensating for those lost skills? When new team members come in, there's new functions of a company, address those. And then address those new threats. And this is why I say it's a living, breathing document. And finally, reassess and reevaluate at every opportunity. And this means not just you, if you see your competitors dealing with it, if you see a trend, factor it in. Make sure that what you're doing with your crisis plan is evaluating at all times. Have people assigned to making sure that it is up to date, and exercise. Do the assessments. Make sure that you are doing what we often call tabletop exercises on a regular basis so that your team is trained, because a crisis will hit. And maybe it will be a digital crisis, but that will be part of your crisis plan. Maybe it will be an HR crisis, but that will be part of your crisis plan. Maybe it'll be a financial crisis, but that too will be part of your crisis plan. So what I've done here is I've taken you through very high level, hopefully didn't scare you, things are crazy. Then we've moved down to sort of medium level, how do you deal with the digital crisis? And then finally, some rules by which you can take today and make sure that your organization is following them. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over because they have a quick questionnaire, but then we'll do a quick Q&A.
Yeah, Peter, thank you. That was a really great presentation. Before we do pop into that Q&A, just a heads up that we're popping this little survey right on your screen. Your feedback is really valuable to us. We use it to determine things like topics for future webinars or how to improve them going forward. So we appreciate you taking the time to sort of fill out and give us this insight while you're still listening to the Q&A. So we do have time for a couple of quick questions. One that was sort of a common theme is for maybe those listeners who work within a brand or have yet to establish a more formal influencer program. What are the best first steps that you would recommend in terms of starting to build that network of influencers or champions?
I don't want to give you a non-answer, but the fact of the matter is they're already out there as long as you're looking for them. Start small. If you're looking for those influencers, start talking to the people across your organization, or I hate to use the word bait, but put the bait out there. Don't be afraid to post something online that asks for engagement. You could very well, whether it's a questionnaire or maybe it's an event to invite people to, people will self-select to become your brand ambassadors, regardless of what your product might be. It's very easy to tell these stories when you're Apple and be like, wow, what a great job. Well, they have an iPhone. Not all of us have an iPhone. Figure out who the people are that care about your accounting software. Think about who they are that care about your plumbing equipment or that care about who your organization serves. And start small, because it's all about the viral aspect of communications. What we're trying to essentially do is learn from what marketers have been struggling with for ages now, which is how do I get X number of people to go tell X number of people about our products so that they all can buy it. Well, what we're trying to do now is not just get them to buy the product. We want them to engage with the brand, engage with us as a company, and talk to them. Keep up that conversation.
That's great. And how do you deal with people like lawyers or executives who don't want to comment during a crisis?
Well, I can tell you from lots of experience that is something we deal with on a very regular basis. And my best recommendation is keep trying and show examples, because really one of the ways that I've been most successful is by showing them what happens if you don't. especially if you don't engage on social media, because the old example I would always use, and once again it goes back to Delta's involved and it has nothing to do with that, my love of Delta, it's just at one point United and Delta were, one airline was was engaged on social media and another wasn't. And it's just as simple as talking to people online and saying, we hear your complaints, because think about the JetBlue situation. They're not going to make the snowstorm go away. But what people want is they want to know that they're being heard. And by dealing on a day-to-day basis with your clients, customers, whoever they might be, by just simply saying, you know what, we're sorry you're disappointed. We would love to rectify the situation. You're going to win over people. And when you have that momentum of them moving from a negative position to a positive position, you can carry them through as long as you're not asking. All you're asking for is engagement. You're not asking for them to buy more. You're not asking for them to sell something for you. You're not asking. All you want to do is say, hey, we'd love to keep in touch with you. We'd love to tell you when the new product is coming out. We're sorry that you don't like version 1, but we really think you're going to like version 2. And they may or may not engage with you that way, but you all of a sudden give them the opportunity, and those people that will are the ones you want to look for. And we're playing a numbers game here. And if you do that for 10 people and one person says yes, then you build off of that one person and you go look for another 10. But you just got to keep doing it, because you don't need an army of thousands. One of the terrible things about the world we live in now is that one person can undermine your messaging. Well, guess what? If you have 10 people on your side, they're going to start bolstering your messaging and countering that one person that's taking away from your messaging. So you don't, when I say an army, I don't mean thousands, and for some brands it is thousands, but for your organization it might be 10.
So if my company identifies a crisis that maybe hasn't hit the public consciousness yet, are there specific things that I might do to minimize its impact? Maybe give an exclusive to an outlet or something. Is there anything I can do to make it less of a crisis?
Oh, absolutely. I think that is at the core of what we're talking about here, which is before it becomes a crisis, you want to address it. So if it's a crisis on the horizon, and let's say that it's I don't know, it could be an environmental issue. Well, what you want to do is start positioning your messaging and reach out to individuals that will show your alignment and understanding of what that issue is. And the best thing I can give an example of here is look at how many oil companies are now aligning themselves with green initiatives and environmental initiatives. And that is simply because it might be that oil, or they might, all the environmental issues tied to oil companies, but all of a sudden you see them talking about recycling and all of these kinds of issues. What they're looking for is ways on the scales to balance the positive with the negatives. So look for those opportunities that when you see a crisis on the horizon, yes, engage with media, but engage with media with a message, with a story that you can actually talk to. Show them that you're doing something and that you have the commitment. Don't just tell them, hey, you don't want to just try and distract, because they'll read through that. Show them that there is a commitment to change.
This is great. Unfortunately, it looks like we're already at the top of the hour. I'd like to go ahead and thank you, everybody, for attending today. For those of you who are interested in an archive of our past webinars, you can find those on our website, Cision.com, as well as research and slides from past webinars on SlideShare. That's slideshare.com/Cision. And of course, we're always on Facebook and Twitter. Peter, thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.